Amen. Well, it's good to have Maddie back from Louisiana. Woo! All right. Well, not back good. No, it's good to have you back, Maddie. Good to see you. And love having you up here playing. All right. So we are in 1 Samuel chapter 8 is where we're going to be tonight. If you haven't figured it out yet, wherever we left off last time, we'll pick up next time is kind of how we're working through it. And as I mentioned and as we've talked about, the book of 1 Samuel talks about three main figures, three main people. The first one is Samuel, and we've looked at him and his life. His ministry is not completed yet, but the section that has focused on him is wrapping up. Okay, and so we're kind of coming from a transition between him. The second person that is talked about in this book of 1 Samuel is Israel's first king. His name is Saul. And so we're kind of transitioning from Samuel, a focus on Samuel, to a focus on Saul tonight, and we're going to see that transition kind of unfold. The third that we'll get into is David, who becomes Israel's greatest king, a man after God's own heart, the man that God really reflected God's value as king. So right now we see Israel is governed directly by God, and He has appointed judges to carry out His governing, to carry out the day-to-day tasks. But Israel is really a nation that is under the leadership, the ruling of God, and it's been that way for several hundred years now. He's appointed these judges at needed times. He's directed Israel. He's brought a man or woman to the forefront and has led them in that way. But now Israel is going to move away from the judges, and they're going to have a king. And what we see, as I mentioned, what we're going to see tonight is the beginning of that transition from a nation that is primarily under God. Not that they've done a good job of that. We see all kinds of problems all through the book of Judges. We see all kinds of problems all through the first part of 1 Samuel. But now they are initiating a change from judges, from being under the rule of God. And they say, we want a king, where we're at. And so the first thing we're going to see tonight is Israel's desire. Israel wants a king. Israel's demanding a king is what we're going to see eventually tonight. But their initial desire is we find in at the beginning of 1 Samuel chapter 8. Look at verse 1 with me. It came about when Samuel was old that he appointed his sons judges over Israel. Now the name of his firstborn was Joel, and the name of his second Abijah, and they were judging in Beersheba. His sons, however, did not walk in his ways, but turned aside after dishonest gain, and took bribes and perverted justice. Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah. And they said to him, Behold, you have grown old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king for us to judge us, like all the nations. So basically, bottom line, their request is what? A king. That's what they want. They want a king. But what's their reason? That was the problem. Everyone else is doing it. That's where the problem kicks in. And what we see here is the one negative commentary we have on Samuel's life. The one negative commentary, the one negative aspect about Samuel's life that we see here. Did y'all catch what the negative aspect is? What went wrong with Samuel and his testimony, his reputation? What's the challenge that's facing him? His kids did not follow his ways. I don't think it says so. But his kids did not follow his ways, And what did he? Okay, so that's one issue. But what's the second issue related to that? What did he do that made the problem a national problem? He appointed them as judges. Okay, their character did not reflect godly values. Their character did not reflect the priorities of their father. And in addition to that, then he set them up and he said, I'm going to make you the next judges. Yep, kind of how we started off the book, wasn't it? And so what we see here is God didn't put Samuel. Nowhere do we read that God put Samuel in a position or ask him to appoint the next judge. Hey, Samuel, I want you to appoint the next judge. That was not his role. His son's character was, here's how bad their character was. It was evident to all the leadership, all the rulers of the nation of Israel, because it says all the elders came to him. So it wasn't just that one or two people had a run-in with him. Their character was evident to Israel as a whole. And these were not minor, subtle issues, not a personal, personality conflict over on the side here with somebody. These were true, genuine character issues going on, and they were obvious. And then the problem kicked in, and it becomes an Israel problem. It moves from a Samuel's family challenge to an Israel problem when he appoints them judges. So now it becomes a national problem. So the leaders of Israel, says the elders, those men who are the respective men of the community, those who are proactively kind of providing guidance, direction for the people. The leaders, the elders, observe this and they responded. Now, we're going to see a whole mess that Israel has on their hands here. But this is the one thing they did right. They saw a problem with the leader, and they were trying to address it. They saw a problem with leadership, and they were trying to resolve it. And so good for them to notice character matters in a leader. Character matters. Because as the leader goes, so goes the nation. As the leader goes, so goes. And so they noticed, and they said, we've got to do something about this. And so they approached Samuel about it. Okay? They went right to the source. Okay, you've appointed them. We see a problem here. So it's like, okay, Samuel, you kind of messed up here. Israel, you're doing good. But don't give Israel too much credit here because they're it's about to spiral downward from here. It's always a disaster when leaders in ministry don't exhibit the characteristics that they promote. It's always a disaster when people claim to be Christian leaders and don't live out Christian values. It's always a disaster when there's this duplicity going on. They act one way in their public eye, another way private. And it's important, just on a practical note, it's important for ministries to prioritize character and true leadership. Billy Graham's ministry had this one of the things they did early on in the ministry, come up with some guidelines. And there's three main categories that any ministry is going to have guidelines in to protect the integrity of leadership protect them from false accusations, protect them from falling and causing problems. One of them is in the area of morality. In the area of morality, relationships, pornography, things like that. They're going to put safeguards in place to protect that. And Billy Graham wouldn't even get on an elevator alone with a woman and ride an elevator up four flights, 3 flights, whatever. I mean, that's the extent that he went to protect his ministry from that. That's the extent that their ministry went to. Next one is finances. Person in leadership can often get greedy. Can often say, you know what, a little more of that belongs to me than was designated. That's what's going on with Samuel's sons. They became greedy. They started taking money for themselves. And then the last one that ministries need to look out for: morality issue, financial issue, the money, the greed. Thirdly, the pride. Giving someone too much limelight, too much glory, too much attention. There's some people in ministry that are treated like celebrities. They're surrounded by people who, have their back and who are the yes men. That's not genuine, authentic. That is the kind of thing where those kinds of leaders start to think, well, this rule, this direction from God doesn't apply to me because I'm someone. Look at all I'm doing. This doesn't apply to me. Different standards. They begin rationalizing. So there's a lot of examples in ministry today where those things, and specifically those three things, have caused the downfall of a ministry. It even happens in the secular world, doesn't it? Any of y'all been to a Coldplay concert recently? Okay, even in the secular world, and it's like I'm glad our culture responded that way. Like, this is not appropriate, because it's not. Here's a CEO of a secular company. Here's a head of HR at a secular company. They're not with their spouses. Yeah, there's always one. Morality, finances, pride. So Samuel's son had a different area of rebellion than Eli's sons. Gerstein is right. This is kind of a repeat of Eli's sons, but theirs was more in the area of morality. There was a little bit of the financial aspect or the greed aspect with the meats, such that they were taking more than their fair share. But theirs was really a moral issue. For Samuel's sons, we have them having a financial issue. Theirs is a love for money. So the leaders of Israel approach on behalf of the people. They approach Samuel, and they were doing the right thing, but they went about it the wrong way. Their concern over his son's greed was right, but their demand for a king was not. And they said, we want a king so that we can be like all the other nations around us. Verse 5, they gave four different reasons for this, for their concern. One, Samuel, you're old. You're not going to be around much. You've been ruling us, but you're old, and you're not going to be around for long. Two, your sons, your sons do not have the same character as you. They don't govern the way that you govern. You lead us in godly principles, and they don't. The cool thing about that is they recognize and they desire someone like Samuel. They recognize Samuel's godly leadership, his character in leadership, and that's what they desire. They don't want these guys that are trying to be spiritual leaders on one side, but they're really just full of greed on the other. So they just outright said, we want a king instead of judges. We want a king. They gave the rationale, and their last rationale was, we also want to be like everyone else around us. We want to be like all the other nations. So let's keep reading in verse 6. But this thing was displeasing in the sight of Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to judge us." So this isn't just Samuel getting his feelings hurt. It is probably a little bit of that. It's probably him like, "Why are you rejecting me? What's your problem with my sons?" But what do we see him do? And Samuel prayed to the Lord. Again, verse 6. Samuel prayed to the Lord. The Lord said to Samuel, "Listen to the voice of the people in regard to all they say to you, for they have not rejected you." That's God's word to Samuel. They have not rejected you. That's part of what makes me think. I bet he was feeling a little took it a little personal. No, Samuel, they have not rejected you. They have rejected me from being king over them. Verse 8, like all the deeds which they have done since the day I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day, that they have forsaken me and they served other gods. So they're doing to you also. Now then, listen to their voice. However, you shall solemnly warn them and tell them of the procedure of the king who will reign over them. So Samuel sees a problem with their request. He understands and he gets what the issue is, and he brings this concern before God. He brings this concern before God, but he doesn't do it as a last resort. Have you ever been in a tough situation? You try to figure it out. You try to come up with this solution. You stay up at night. You're completely overwhelmed by what to do about it, and you find like, okay, I guess I'll pray about it. What did Samuel do? He was upset about it. He's like, this is a bad move. And the very next sentence, he prayed to God. This is a first resort for Samuel, not a last resort for Samuel. Looking back at the solution provided by the elders of Israel, did they have any godly options? Did they have any other way they could have approached this? Or were they backed into a corner? This was the only thing they could have done. There's a whole lot of options they could have chosen. What's up, Kirsten? Yep. Yeah. They don't know what they want, basically, do they? So, did they have any other options though, other than saying, "We don't like your sons as judges"? Good conclusion. We don't like your sons as judges. So therefore, the clear conclusion of that is we need a king. Those two things aren't really even related. They did a knee-jerk reaction to a real problem, but they did a knee-jerk reaction. They should have expressed their concern over Samuel's sons and their character. They should have. Then they should have sought God's direction, God's wisdom in that circumstance. How should we move forward with this, God? We see this problem. We see this issue. How should we move forward? What do you want us to do as a nation? I know these aren't the kind of leaders you want for us as a nation, God. So what do you? See how they missed that whole step? You see how they jumped past that and they came to their own conclusion and then they went and made a demand. How much heartache would we all save ourselves? We went to prayer first rather than the last. That just takes a mind that is focused, a mind that is, we read last week, a mind that's directed, a heart that's directed. Because then your first what So this decision and this demand by Israel is one that's going to plague them for generations to come. God tells Samuel in this decision that they've rejected God. They're not rejecting Samuel. They're not rejecting a man. They've rejected God. They've rejected his leadership over them. And God basically gives Samuel an instruction. Here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a piece of paper, Samuel, and go back to the elders and show them. Make the list. Draw a line down the middle of the paper. Make a list. Positives about a king. Negatives about a king. I want you to go through that list with them and just show them. And he says, show them the procedure of a king, or show them what a king will look like in their lives. Show them what it's going to look like for the people that they're representing as they're coming to you. And so just a spoiler alert here, the positive side, as Samuel talks about it, the positive side is empty. Okay? So let's read God's warning here, starting in verse 10. So God told Israel that they would have a king. He had been telling them that for hundreds of years. But all the way back into Genesis 17, he said, kings will come from you, Abraham. There will be kings that come from you and through you, your family. So why is this request wrong? They had three wrong motives or thought processes. First one is their motive is to be like the other nations. They all have kings. They all rule this way. They all have this one setup. Why are we not like all the other nations? Why are we not like them? What's going on? God, you have even talked about Israel having kings. God had a different king in mind than what they were demanding at this moment. Second thing we see that this wasn't God's time. God had a king in mind for Israel, but that king wasn't here yet. That king wasn't ready yet. This wasn't God's time. Sometimes we may have a right direction in life and a wrong time. I have a right direction at a wrong time. And this was not the right time. They wanted a king now. We need a king now because Samuel, you're old, your kids are bums, and we want a king right now. Never seek out God's time. They assume that from their very narrow perspective of seeing Samuel's age and his gray hair, king he walks with or whatever, they see his sons and their moral character. We have all the information, and the only solution in our minds is we must have a king now. We need that right now. You realize our perspective very, very, very God's perspective. Why are we trying to make a decision? Have y'all ever do jigsaw puzzles? So you got like 1,000 pieces scattered all over the table, and some of them have multiple colors on them. Some of them are all one color. It's like we have one piece of the puzzle, and we're like, "Oh, I know what the picture is." Yeah, dude. There's a little guy right here holding something. But I can tell there's a man standing. So I know what this picture is. Our perspective is that limited. Thirdly, Israel's request demonstrates their lack of faith in God. It demonstrates the fact that they no longer trust God to deliver them. Does anyone remember what we just read last week about the Philistines? God delivered Israel from the world superpower of that time, the most militarily advanced army of the day, and God delivered them with really no casualties that are spoken of. God delivered them. But now they say, we want a king to help us fight our wars. So their motive was to be like other nations. Their timing was wrong. Impatience just is wrong. Not waiting up. And then thirdly, Israel, they didn't have faith. God's ability to lead them and God's ability to fight their battles for them. So God directs Samuel to warn them and point out all the foolishness of this desire for a king. And so there's two common themes as we read through this. We're going to start reading in verse 10 here. There's two things, characteristics that I want you to listen for. What will this king be like? First one, he will take. Listen for how many times you hear that in these verses that we're about to read through. Second one, you will serve. There's the two themes of what a king is like. He will take from you, you will serve him. Listen to these verses now with those two things in mind. Verse 10. So Samuel spoke all the words of the Lord to the people who had asked him for a king. He said, this will be the procedure of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and place them for himself in his chariots and among his horsemen, and they will run before his chariots. He will appoint for himself commanders of thousands and fifties, and some to do his plowing, to reap and his harvest, and to make his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will also take your daughters for perfumers and cooks and bakers. He will take the best of your fields and your vineyards and your olive groves and give them to his servants. He will take a tenth of your seed and out of your vineyards and give it to his officers and to his servants. He will also take your male servants and your female servants and the best young men and your donkeys and use them for his work. He will take a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will become his servants. Then you will cry out in that day because of your king whom you have chosen for yourselves. But the Lord will not answer you in that. You hear that in there? And any hints of he will take? How many times did it say that? I bet if you went back through those verses and underlined them all, you'd be like, oh. And then references to he or you will serve. You will serve him. Your servants will serve him. Your children will serve him. This monarchy that they're demanding is more parasitic than benevolent. You know what a parasite is, right? Something that lives off something. It doesn't survive. I was growing up. Have y'all ever played Monopoly? That's a horrible game. I grew up playing it with my cousins. We occasionally play it with friends or something like that. It's a horrible game because someone always ends up mad. At least when I played it growing up. My kids play it all the time now, and they never do. You know, they're like, oh, whatever. But I cared about winning, and so I was sometimes the mad kid at the end of the game because I rarely won. But yet you get to the point in the game where all the properties are bought and no one has monopoly, and then everybody starts bartering, and you try to act the nice guy in doing that. You're like, no, if you give me that one, I'll give you this one, and I'll give you $300 also. How about that? And no, if I give you this one, then you'll have a monopoly. Yeah, but that doesn't matter. Look what you'll have. The monopoly doesn't matter. The heck it doesn't. You know what happens 2 turns after you say yes to that trade? They've got hotels on it, and you're paying $1,200 rent, and you go broke in 3 turns because they now have that monopoly. That's basically what he's saying here. You think it's all good and it looks cool in a storybook? A king is a cool sounding thing, but it's not going to work out that way. He's going to take from you. He's going to force you to serve him. That became the theme of Israel over the next. There's an account in 1 Kings 21. Ahab spotted a field, a vineyard. The king of Israel spotted a vineyard that, like, ooh, that's in a good spot. I like that. I want that. And so he forced the owner of it to give it to them. The owner was reluctant and pushed back on it. So he had the owner killed and then took the field. What did God say would happen when you have a king? He will take. The power is going to go to his head. He's going to think he's above you all. He's not going to be a servant of yours. He's going to make you his servant. What you want is not a good thing. Israel's fourth king, Rehoboam, was immature, ignored godly counsel that his father David had sought after, and instead took advice from his friends, from his childhood friends. He grew up with these guys. These are my buds that I grew up with. In 1 Kings 12, he spoke to them saying, as he's addressing the people, he spoke to them and said, "My father," or it's actually not David's son, it's Solomon's son. "My father made your yoke heavy. My father taxed you a lot. My father expected a lot from you. But I will add to your yoke. My father disciplined you with whips, but I will discipline you with scorpions. I'm going to make it, you thought it was hard before, it's going to get worse. It's going to get so much worse." So they lived out this warning from Samuel that God gave. Essentially, God's trying to tell them through Samuel, he's trying to tell them, your solution is worse than the problem you're facing. It's like watching one of those drug commercials. Do you have hiccups? Well, take this drug. You might die, but you won't have hiccups anymore, okay? You might have this incurable rash and, have heart disease for the rest of your life, but it'll cure your... it's like the problem is much smaller than this, than the solution. So Israel made a request. They saw a need. They had this desire for a king. God warned them. God warned them through Samuel. He gave them this stern warning. He will take. You will serve. So what's Israel's response? They make a demand. Look in verse 19. Nevertheless. You know what nevertheless means? I wasn't really listening to anything you said there, Samuel, because I had my mind made up anyway. I don't. Nevertheless, you said all that. I don't care. I want what I want, and I want it when I want it. Nevertheless, the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel, and they said, "No, but there shall be a king over us." That's why I put Israel's demand. That's pretty demanding, right? No, but there shall be a king over us, that we may also be like all the nations. That's a good goal. Let's be like all the heathen around us. Let's be like all those people who serve other gods. Let's be like all those people who have no relationship with God. I can't wait to be like them. Yeah, and they want to kill us. But let's be like them. We want to be like all the other nations, that our king may judge us and go out before us and fight our battles. Hadn't God been fighting their battles for them? Hadn't God parted the waters so they could go through the river, so they could go through the sea? Hadn't God provided their manna? Hadn't God provided for them in ways? Hadn't He beat the Philistine army and defeated them with a storm, with the thunder that threw them into such confusion that they basically won without firing a shot? But no, we would rather have, that was cool, God did that, it was nice with God and all, but we'd rather have a king fight our battles for us. Because that's what all the cool kids around us do. That's what everybody around us does. They have a king lead them into battle. We just kind of go into battle like, oh, we don't have a king. Everyone else has a king. Kind of embarrassed right now. So, what in the world? The Lord said to Samuel, "Listen to their voice." This is the part that's a little turning here. He said, listen to their voice and appoint them. Samuel said to the men of Israel, go, every man. And we're going to see that out of everyone being in their cities, God will appoint Samuel to the person that will be king. Not by God's choosing, but by the people's command. So their insistence on having a king is sinful. And God called Israel, because God called Israel to be set apart. He called them to be holy. He called them to be not like the world in which they live. I want you to be different. You're my chosen people. I want all the world to know that you are my special people. And what they say, we want to be like their. We don't want to be your chosen people. We don't want to stand out. That's embarrassing. We want to be just like them. Israel was falling into this trap that we need to watch out for too. Trap of being just like culture. Israel was falling. The summer before I went away to college, my cousin's family had a house out on Long Island. They had just moved there recently for work, and so they had this house out on Long Island. I've just graduated. My cousin's a couple of years younger than me. He had the coolest car, 1970 awesome car. The coolest thing is he had this car and he didn't have a driver's license. So, but anyway, so we're out there. I go out there with him, and I actually had to drive the car all the way out there from, his family lived in Michigan. They were going out to Long Island. So I had a couple days driving that thing out there, and the whole time we're there, driving. But every day he and I went to the beach, and the waves up there are pretty cool. And so, it's like kind of a surfing area because of are up there. But we just spent every day at the beach, and for probably about 3 or 4 weeks, and in the water all day long on the beach, just hanging out, just goofing around, chilling the whole summer. But one thing I learned, along with cool surfing waves, comes this thing called rip current. Anybody ever hear of those? They're not a scary thing if you know what they are. But if you're not aware, what it is all the water comes rushing in, and then it takes the path of least resistance out, which is going to be sometimes a very narrow path. And so all this water is rushing back out to sea. Because water then goes back out as the waves, as the next set of waves coming in. And if you get caught in one of those things, they will sweep you out so far to sea before you even know what happened. Okay, I'm not trying to scare you to death or anything, but just trying to make you aware. And so it can be deadly because people get swept out and they're like, I used to be 50 feet from shore, now I'm 150 feet. What in the world happened in that 10 seconds? It will take you that fast. And so they start swimming against it. You're not going to be able to swim faster than the river. Olympic swimmers can't swim faster than the river. So I'm pretty sure you can't either. And so it's a dangerous thing. There are people that die each year because they get caught in those and they panic and they don't know what to do. You can't just let the current carry you. But there's no way to beat the current either. You can't swim harder. So you're in a quandary. What do you do? Here's the. I'm going to save your life now. If you ever get caught in the rip current, thank me later. Okay? And here's what you can do. You're going to swim parallel to shore. Because rip currents are moving fast. They're like this little tiny river in the ocean that's dragging you out to deep water. They're moving fast, but they're narrow. Not that narrow. They're narrow. So they're maybe there may be 30, 40 feet wide. So what you're going to do is you're going to swim parallel from shore. And before you know it, you're like, okay, I'm not getting pulled away from shore. Actually, the waves are kind of back. You're going to swim parallel. You're going to get out of that current. Rather, you're not going to fight the current. You're not going to go with the current. You're going to get out of that current. Then you can safely get back to shore. Israel, what they were doing is just going with the flow. And they're going to drown. Rather than getting out of the current of their culture, rather than getting out of the flow of what's going on in the world around them, they're just along for the ride. They're caving to this desire to be just like the world that they live in. This is the danger that we face too. There's that temptation to, how can I be a solid Christian but not look like it in certain circumstances, not look weird in certain circumstances. Sometimes you just don't look weird. It's okay. You are weird. Go ahead and own it. All right? Go with it. It's okay. You don't have to fit in everywhere, because I would advise you to not fit in everywhere. This desire to fit in can drive our decisions, can drive our priorities. Matthew chapter 5, Jesus talks about what he's called his followers to be. He says, I've called you to be different. I've called you to be a light. Well, dark. I've called you to be a salt in this world that desperately needs the love. I've called you to be something different than this world. So Israel wants his king to solve their current momentary problem. And so they're making this big long-term decision for this short temporary problem. But God warned them that their solution was worse than the problem they were facing. They saw this as okay, let's put our heads together. What's a practical way we can get out of this? What's a practical way we can do this? Well, let's step away from the whole idea of being a judge, having a judge. Let's move to the kings. People around us don't seem to have any problems. People around us seem to be doing fine with the whole king thing. They did see a legitimate issue, but then demanded fair solution rather than seeking God's direction. So we get to the end of this last verse that I read, and what we see is their rejection of God. And even in their rejection of God, God says, you know what? Sometimes what you're demanding, what you're fighting for in life, sometimes I'll give it to you so that you can see the error of your way. Verse 22, the Lord said to Samuel, listen to the voice and appoint. I know what it's going to be like. You know what it's going to be like. They don't care what it's going to be like. I want them. They're rejecting. Two principles to close with. First one is as faithful followers of Christ, our calling is to be set apart, not like. As we follow Christ, we're not called to be just like everyone else around us. Don't go with the flow. You got to get out of that current. You got to get out of the stream of the culture, the stream of the world around you. Make godly decisions so you can have a bigger perspective. What's your greatest influence? Could be godly wisdom. I hope it's godly over. correction from people around you who don't care to follow. Second one goes with the second one. Prayer should be us seeking God's wisdom solution. Prayer should be us turning to God and saying, What are you calling me to do? What is it that you're from me, from my family, from the scenario? Not us bringing our desires to God and saying, God, you must bless this, making this demand. Calling on God's wisdom rather than asking us our goal. Other thing, love us enough to warn us. Love us enough to give us the wisdom and guidance for our daily life. God, give us hearts that desire to follow you, follow us.